This is our second lesson in the punctuation system series, and today we are going to talk about our next punctuation mark, which is the comma. Okay, so of all the punctuation marks, the comma is the most flexible in the range of its use. Therefore, it is the most difficult to categorize. and this thing is clear in the next point. Let us first read and then I'll discuss that with you. One dominant use of the comma is to separate closely associated clauses within a sentence, a use that the comma shares with the colon and the semicolon. For example, let me choose the pen. Excuse me. Right, so first of all, as we discuss in the introduction tutorial, that punctuation in the punctuation marks in the punctuation system do two things. One, they separate, and the second, they specify. So this is a separation here, separate closely associated clauses within a sentence. This is what the colon does, and this is what the semicolon does. So you could see this thing. It's very difficult to categorize, or it's a very complex punctuation mark to use because it shares some of its features with other punctuation marks. So now this separation of clauses within a sentence can be done using a comma or the colon or the semicolon. So one thing is done by three different punctuation marks. Obviously that can increase the level of difficulty, but I'll try to make it very simple for you here. Right, school children have adopted the fun as one of their favorite charities. This is one sentence, and you could see a semicolon here. Their small contributions have enabled the fund to reach its target. Now technically you can put a full stop here, but normally full stop is not put because these two sentences are semantically very close. Means they in terms of their meaning they are very close. In terms of their themes they are very close. They are talking about almost the same thing. That's why they're very closely linked, very closely associated. So now either you can use a semicolon or you can use a comma. Yeah, so that's why you could see that the same sentence, the same phrase, you can use either a semicolon or a comma, but there is a small difference between this sentence. So let me read this. School children have adopted the fun as one of their favorite charities, comma, and their small contributions have enabled the fund to reach its target. Now if you use a comma here, then it's better to use and. Okay, or simply you can separate this sentence either using a semicolon or using a conjunction. So this is a conjunction here. Now because this is a very closely associated clause, so it's better to use a comma before and. So this is one use. Let's see the next one. If three or more clauses are coordinated, means they are joined together using coordinating conjunction, which is fanboys, but only the last is preceded by the ands or. Commas are required between the clauses, including the last one. For example, now this could be a bit confusing, but let us have a look at the sentence itself. Now this statement says that if there are three or more clauses, mean three or more sentences, first of all break it into pieces. Okay, so here we go. So we have three clauses, but the last is preceded by an or. So the last one, which is employment figures rows, is preceded by an, means there is and then the last one. Commas are required between the clauses, including the last one. So then you have to use a comma here after the first one, a comma here after the second one, and a full stop at the end. So so you could see that here the comma is separating all three clauses. Prices fell is a sentence. Interest rates fell is a sentence. Employment figures rose is a sentence. So these are three sentences which are joined together. So when they are joined together into one big long sentence, then obviously they are called as clauses. So this is a very similar use of comma as we do it in terms of, or when we are writing a list. Okay, now here you could also use semicolons. So can you see the complexity, as we discussed in the first slide, that it's a commonly used punctuation mark, but at the same time it is very difficult to categorize. So these are clauses, these ones, not a list of items which can be separated like this. So here is a list of items. For example, I bought milk, comma, sugar, comma, rice, comma, cake, and salt. There's no comma before and in this sentence because it is a list. So you could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items have been listed here. The last two items must be separated using and, no comma before and or after cake. So you could ask why there is no comma here. Okay, now here we can see a comma before and, here we don't see a comma before and. The reason is this is a list of items, these are not sentences, and these are sentences. That's why the last one should be separated using a comma and then and. I hope you understand. So let me let me summarize that. If you have to separate three or more clauses or more sentences and the last one has and with it, then use comma between each of them. But if it is a list, I mean you have 15 items or 3 items or 5 items, it doesn't matter. The last two should be separated using and only, no comma at all. All right. The next one is commas are frequently omitted if the clauses are relatively short, provided they are linked by a coordinator. For example, let me choose the pen again. The work was pleasant. This is one sentence. The hours were short. This is a second sentence. And I mean, technically you can put a full stop in between these two sentences, but because they are very closely linked and they are short, so you put and, which is a coordinating conjunction, and no comma as well because these are too short. Okay, the work was pleasant, the hours were short. So this excuse me, this is how you write a compound sentence. On the other hand, if despite close semantic connection there is a contrast prompting the use of but or yet rather than and as the appropriate conjunction, then comma is used. Now look at this sentence first. We are thinking of buying a shortwave radio. One sentence. We haven't made up our minds. Second sentence. Okay, we see a conjunction here and there is a conjunction here. Now what's the difference between this? This is a coordinating conjunction and this is a coordinating conjunction. There is no comma before this coordinating conjunction, but there is a comma before but, and this is here. Okay, why? Because the first sentence and the second sentence are a contrast. Okay, so they are opposite to each other. So if the first sentence is negative, the second is positive, then you use but before that you use a comma. If the first sentence is positive, the second sentence is negative, so you could see the contrast. Yeah, they are opposite to each other. Then you use but and a comma. So this is used in a sentence which offers contrast. Okay, next, a comma can be used to separate two adjectives if a conjunction is not used. Now once again I would emphasize the first point that the comma is quite confusing and it is very difficult to categorize because it has got many uses and it depends on different people. I mean, sometimes let's say there are two people, one wants to use a comma, the other one doesn't want to use a comma, and both of them can be correct, and that creates problems or complexity for some students. So look at the sentence now here. Just focus on adjectives. He walked with long and slow strides. So long is an adjective, slow is an adjective. This sentence separates both these adjectives with and. Okay, but he walked with long, comma, slow strides. So these two adjectives, the same adjectives here, are separated using a comma. So both these sentences are absolutely correct. Okay, so let's say the student number one uses and, the student number two uses a comma. Both of them are correct. Okay, so that's how the use of comma is very, very flexible, I would say. Okay, so similar is with adverbs. She slowly, which is an adverb, and carefully moved the box. So two adverbs joined together or separated using and. But here, slowly and carefully are separated by a comma. So both of these sentences are correct. So the summary is that you can either separate adjectives and adverbs using a comma or using conjunction and. I hope you understand that. The next use is a pair of commas is used to separate extra information in a sentence. For example, this one. Shakespeare, comma, who is renowned for his wonderful poetry, comma, wrote 154 sonnets. Okay, so this is extra information, the one that is underlined. So this is also a use of commas, but in this case you have to use a pair of commas to separate extra information. Now, whether you have used the pair of commas in the correct place or no, it's very easy to determine. So for example, if you delete the extra information, the rest of the sentence should make complete sense. If it makes sense, then your extra information is used properly and the commas used correctly. If it does not make sense, then it means your commas are not used correctly. For example, Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets. This sentence makes absolute sense, yeah, without this extra information. So it means that the commas, the pair of commas, are used properly. Now let us see if we move the comma here. So for example, if I use the comma here, so now what I'm trying to say is that this is the extra information. Okay, so from this point to this point. Now if we delete that extra information and if we read the rest of the sentence, if it makes sense, then it is correct. Then it means that we have put the extra information in correct commas, otherwise our use of comma is wrong. Shakespeare, who is wrote 154 sonnets, that does not make sense at all. So it means that one of our commas, or probably both of them, are wrong. Alright, so move the comma here and there and see if you can get rid of the extra information and the sentence still makes sense. If it is so, then your commas are in the right place. A pair of commas is used to separate a positive in a sentence. For example, Anne Boleyn, the wife of Henry VIII, was beheaded. Now, a positive is a noun. Okay, it's a noun phrase, you could say. So it's very easy to understand, and at the same time it is extra information. For example, this bit is a positive, the wife of Henry VIII. It's a noun phrase. It is talking about somebody. Let us see whether it talks about somebody or not. So who was the wife of Henry VIII? Anne Boleyn. Okay, and who was Anne Boleyn? She was the wife of Henry VIII. So it is the same person. You could see that. So it is just an explanation of this person. Means this bit, this noun phrase is explaining who this person is. So now this is also extra information, and this should be treated just like that extra information, and it should be enclosed between two commas. Now if this is removed, the rest of the sentence should make sense. For example, Anne Boleyn was beheaded. Absolutely perfect. Okay, so this is a sentence which makes complete sense. I hope you understand that. Let us move forward. To separate the main clause from the subordinate clause, a comma is used. For example, now that is the most common use of the comma, and it's very simple, straightforward. If I go to London, I'll bring you books, or I will bring you books. Okay, now one of them is the subordinate clause, this one, and one of them is the main clause. So one subordinate clause, one main clause makes a complex sentence. Yeah, so these should be separated. Two clauses are separated using a comma, or sometimes a subordinating conjunction, for example, because, if, while, however. Okay, all these types of conjunctions. But because we are talking about comma here now, so remember that the subordinate conjunction is incomplete sentence, and the main subordinate clause is the incomplete sentence, and the main clause is a complete sentence. For example, if you read this bit only, I'll bring you books, is a complete sentence, but if I go to London is incomplete. So these two are separated using a comma. I hope you understand that. These can be swapped around. For example, I'll bring you books if I go to London. That's fine too, but once again you have to separate them using a comma. So if I will bring you books, comma, if I go to London, full stop. That's how you do it. A comma is used to separate adverbial from the main clause. For example, weary and impatient, comma, she left the meeting early. Now she left the meeting early is the main clause. Okay, weary and impatient is adverbial. Now what is an adverbial? Let us learn that as well. So what did she do when she was tired and impatient? She left. Okay, so leaving is verb. Okay, and these two tell us more about this. Okay, so, or you could say that there's a link between leaving and weary and impatient. So when she became weary and impatient, she left. So a word that tells us more about a verb is an adverb. Okay, let me write it. It's very difficult to write with the mouse. Okay, so a word that tells us more about a verb is an adverb. But then what is an adverbial? So adverb is one word. So if it is more than one, two or three, it's a phrase, then it's an adverbial. Okay, so normally they start the sentence. Sometimes they can come at the end, but it's better to use them in the beginning of a sentence. So an adverbial is separated by a comma from the rest of the sentence or from the main clause. Right, a comma is also used after these words. So this is very simple, straightforward. If you're writing a dialogue, if you're writing a quotation, something like that, then you have to use comma after yes, comma after no, comma after however, or so and therefore. So these are the words that take comma after them. However, if however does not start a sentence, then it is enclosed between a pair of commas. For example, adverbials are not, however, the only types of errors that students made. So here in this sentence you could see that however it does not start the sentence, it is in the middle of a sentence, so then it should be enclosed between two commas. Commas are also used with vocatives when you address a person or when you say their name in short or in simple. For example, if you say, John, I think you should do this. So after John, you have to put a comma, and help yourself, Carol. Help yourself, comma, Carol. So simply, you have to separate the name of the person using a comma from the rest of the sentence. So that's why these types of punctuation marks are called separating. So punctuation marks do two things. Remember, separation, specification. So this is separation. Hope you understand. Thanks for watching, and I wish you all the best. If you have any questions, you can share in the comment section, or if you want to share some examples of these different types of uses of comma, that would be great. Thank you very much. I'll see you later. Bye.